This episode is brought to you by Tools and Weapons, a podcast hosted by Microsoft Vice Chair and President Brad Smith. In it, global leaders discuss the promise and peril of the digital age, from environmental sustainability and cybersecurity to ethical AI. Guests like journalist Kara Swisher and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella share lessons from their past to reframe some of society's toughest challenges and seek new solutions. Follow Tools and Weapons with Brad Smith on Spotify now.
This is Optimal Finance Daily, episode 2452, A Margin of Safety by Nick Maggiulli of dollarsandData.com. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. We're going to get right to today's post as we optimize your life. A Margin of Safety by Nick Maggiulli of dollarsandData.com. On the surface, the life of Christina Sandhaus does not seem particularly remarkable. She has a master's degree in speech pathology. She owns her own home. She's married. But there's something different about Christina. She only has half a brain. At the age of 7, Christina was diagnosed with encephalitis, a rare neurological condition characterized by frequent seizures. As a result, it was recommended that she undergo a hemispherectomy, where half of her brain would be removed. The procedure was performed in 1996 when Christina was 8 years old by the now famous politician and neurosurgeon Ben Carson. As a result of the surgery, Christina lost most of the motor skills on the left side of her body, but today she has the ability to walk and lives a mostly normal life. I tell this story because it illustrates how amazing natural systems can be at adapting to change and thriving in the face of uncertainty. You might assume that after losing half a brain, most individuals would be completely non-functional, but you would be wrong. Patients undergoing a hemispherectomy do experience changed motor skills, but one study suggests that cognitive changes were not major. This is what makes life so amazing. It explains why we can live with only one kidney though we're born with 2. It explains how our brains can adapt to changes, that is, neuroplasticity, even when we're missing an entire hemisphere. If you think about it, this all boils down to natural systems relying on redundancy to increase the chance of survival. In other words, nature has a trick up its sleeve, a margin of safety. When it comes to investing, having a margin of safety increases the chance of financial survival and is arguably the most important and difficult investment rule of all. To illustrate this, consider the following question. What is the most important piece of information when it comes to buying a stock? Is it management, growth prospects, profitability? No, no, and no. The most important piece of information when buying a stock or any asset is the price you pay. That's right. Even with bad management, terrible growth, and bad profitability, there exists some price, possibly a negative price, that is, I pay you to own it, at which every asset would be a good investment. All the other aspects of an investment would fail you if you pay the wrong price. This is the fundamental tenet of value investing, and the data to back it up is extensive. If you still don't believe me, consider what Warren Buffett said to Brent Beshore over dinner last night. Price is my due diligence. This simple yet profound idea is the essence behind a margin of safety. It implies that you can still profit from an investment even after getting some bad luck if you can get a good enough price. Therefore, if you think the intrinsic value of a company is $100 a share and you get it for $50, you have quite a bit of wiggle room for bad things to happen, such as lawsuits, bad management, a Kylie Jenner tweet, etc., so you can recover. Dan Rasmussen recently wrote an incredible piece on his experience in private equity that backs this idea further. Quote, one PE firm did such an analysis and found that over 50% of deals done at valuations of more than 10 times EBITDA lost money, and that the aggregate multiple of money was barely over 1.0x. That is, for every dollar invested, only slightly more than $1 was returned to investors. End quote. Once again, higher purchase prices imply lower returns. You may be thinking that price only matters for the first few years, but over longer periods, the price paid shouldn't matter. I even implied this when I previously discussed valuations and showed how annualized real returns converged over longer time periods for the US stock market. However, my friend Jake pointed out how even small differences in annual returns can make huge dollar differences when compounded. I looked into this further and realized that he was completely right. If you look at every 30-year period for the US stock market from 1881 onward, you'll see that lower starting valuations imply higher future dollar growth. There's a clear negative relationship between initial valuation and future dollar growth. While valuations aren't completely predictive, they do seem to matter. So, value investing must be killing it right now, right? Nope. It's either underperforming or doing okay, but it depends on how you measure it. And this is why value investing, despite being arguably the most important investing rule across all time and space, is also one of the most difficult. Ignorance is easier than catching falling knives. Despite all the evidence I just discussed about how much purchase price matters in investing, I still think you should mostly ignore this advice if you're an average retail investor. Why? Buying when things are cheap requires you to time the market to some extent. This is difficult because you could buy when you think something is cheap and then it gets far cheaper. In the Meb Faber Value Talk, he makes the following joke that illustrates his point. Quote, "What do you call a market that's down 90%? That's a market that was down 80% and then proceeded to go down 50% more." End quote. Trying to buy an investment as it's bottoming is known as catching a falling knife, and it can be both difficult and scary. So what should you do instead of exclusively trying to buy cheap? Consider the following. Number 1, dollar cost average, or as I love to say, just keep buying. While this is not optimal mathematically, since you sometimes buy assets as inflated valuations, behaviorally, it is by far the best solution I know for the average retail investor. Buying consistently is an ignorant approach to market valuations that is far easier than catching a falling knife. And number 2, add a value tilt to your equity allocation. There are lots of value ETFs and mutual funds out there that can give you some value exposure. I wouldn't put too much of my total equity in this though, as value is known to go through periods of underperformance, which can make holding the investment difficult. If any of this got you interested in learning more about value investing, I recommend the following books to start. The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham and Jason Zieweg, The Education of a Value Investor by Guy Spear, Security Analysis by Benjamin Graham and David L. Dodd, and Margin of Safety by Seth Klarman. This book is out of print, difficult to find, and currently sells for $700 for a used copy. Best of luck if you find one. You just listened to the post titled A Margin of Safety by Nick Maggiulli of dollarsandData.com.
This episode is brought to you by Tools and Weapons, a podcast hosted by Microsoft Vice Chair and President Brad Smith. In it, global leaders discuss the promise and peril of the digital age, from environmental sustainability and cybersecurity to ethical AI. Guests like journalist Kara Swisher and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella share lessons from their past to reframe some of society's toughest challenges and seek new solutions. Follow Tools and Weapons with Brad Smith on Spotify now.
This episode is brought to you by Google. The Google Cybersecurity Certificate provides the necessary skills to begin a career in cybersecurity. Visit safety.google/cyber workforce today.
This article reminded me of a question I see all the time from new investors. They're curious if they should wait for a market downturn to start investing. I think it's important to remember that you'll almost never win by trying to time the market, and that time in the market is much more effective for building wealth. The strategy of investing regularly, regardless of what the market is doing, is known as dollar cost averaging, and it reduces the impact of volatility on the overall purchase of your investments. This strategy removes much of the detail work of attempting to time the market in order to make purchases of equities at the best prices. A great example of this strategy at work is with a 401k. You're making regular contributions from every paycheck regardless of what the market's doing. Dollar cost averaging guarantees a mathematically favorable average price for your investments because you're buying at both the highs and the lows. It also pairs well with a long-term passive investment strategy. It truly allows you to invest it and forget it. And that's a wrap for another Monday show. Have a great start to your week, and I'll be back tomorrow where optimal life awaits.